They found my daughter sitting on a bench outside the Loblaws on Bloor Street with 2 garbage bags, a rolling suitcase, and my granddaughter asleep across her lap in a winter coat 2 sizes too small. It was February. It was -14. My daughter had been there for 3 hours. My son-in-law had changed the locks while she was at work. I pulled up in my car, stepped out onto the icy sidewalk, and looked at the woman my daughter had become in 5 years of marriage. Shoulders folded inward, eyes that had forgotten how to meet mine, hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and not from the cold. I crouched down, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my granddaughter's ear, and felt something settle in my chest. Not rage, not grief, something older and quieter than both. "Get in the car," I said. My son-in-law thought he was throwing away a woman with nothing. He had no idea the company he worked for, the one that paid his 6-figure salary, the one that had funded his lifestyle for 4 years, belonged to me. He had never known. My daughter had never known. And in the days that followed, I was going to make sure everyone in this city found out exactly what kind of man had been hiding behind that salary. Welcome. Before we go any further, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. A quick note, this story contains dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. Some names and details have been changed, but the patterns of financial abuse and coercive control described here are real, and they happen every day to real families. The drive to my house in Forest Hill took 22 minutes. My granddaughter woke up somewhere on Spadina, looked out the window at the snow, and asked where her rabbit was. Her rabbit, a gray stuffed thing with one missing eye that she'd had since she was born, had been left in the apartment. My daughter looked at me, her lip was trembling. "We'll get you a new one, sweetheart," I said. "Even better." My granddaughter pressed her forehead against the glass and said nothing. She was 5 years old. She already knew that some things, once left behind, don't come back. Children understand loss faster than we give them credit for. Inside, I settled them in the guest room on the 2nd floor. I ran a bath. I ordered soup from the place on Street Claire that my daughter had loved since she was a teenager. I waited until I heard the water running and the sound of my granddaughter's small voice asking her mother to wash her hair. Then I walked downstairs to my office, sat behind my desk, and made a phone call. My head of security answered before the 2nd ring. "I need you to pull every financial record associated with my son-in-law," I said. "Employment history, personal accounts, any lines of credit he's opened in the last 3 years. All of it." He didn't ask why. He'd worked for me for 11 years. He knew what tone of voice meant what. "How long do you need?" 48 hours, I said. "Consider it done." I hung up, poured myself a small glass of scotch, and stood at the window that looks out over the back garden. In summer, it's full of hydrangeas, my daughter's favorite. In February, it's just snow and bare branches and the distant sound of a plow on the street. I stood there for a long time. My son-in-law thought he could throw my daughter out like a bag of recycling and face no consequences. He thought she was alone. He thought I was just a woman of a certain age, with a house in a nice neighborhood and money enough to be comfortable. He had never once, in 5 years, asked me a single serious question about what I did for a living. That was his first mistake. My second mistake, if I'm honest, was letting it go on as long as I did. I'd had doubts about my son-in-law before the wedding. Not dramatic doubts, no single moment of clarity. Just small things that accumulated quietly, the way snow does on a rooftop, invisible until the weight becomes too much. The way he'd interrupted my daughter in restaurants. The way he'd laughed just slightly too long when she said something she was proud of. The way he'd looked at me, early on, sizing me up, calculating. My daughter was 31 when they met. She'd been working as a marketing director at a mid-sized firm downtown, smart and capable and entirely too willing to believe that love meant sacrifice. He was charming and handsome and had a way of making her feel, in those early months, like she was the most important person in any room. I had watched. I had said nothing. I had hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. The knock came at 7 the next morning. My head of security set a folder on my desk and sat across from me without being asked. "Start with the worst of it," I said. He opened the folder. "There are 2 personal lines of credit opened 6 months ago at RBC and TD, both under your daughter's name. Combined total, $87,000. He paused. "Her signature is on the applications." I kept my face still. Is it her signature? He slid a document across the desk. I sent scans to a forensic document examiner last night. Preliminary results came back an hour ago. The signature on the RBC application is consistent with your daughter's. The TD application, he tapped the page, is not. It's close. Someone practiced. But the pressure points are wrong, and the loop on the second letter of her last name doesn't match any of her verified signatures. Forged. One of them, yes. Possibly both. He'll need the originals to be certain. I looked at the numbers. 87,000. What's it been used for? Transferred in 3 installments to a numbered company registered in Alberta. He pulled out another page. The company was incorporated 14 months ago. The listed director is a name I don't recognize, but the mailing address matches an office suite my son-in-law rented on King Street West. He had been building something. Carefully. Methodically. Under my daughter's name. There's more, my head of security said. His voice was careful in the way it gets when he's about to tell me something he knows will change things. Tell me. He set down a photograph. A woman, 34, 35, dark hair, a warm, open face that reminded me painfully of my daughter at the same age. Her name is Patricia. She dated your son-in-law from 2019 to 2021, before your daughter. He was quiet for a moment. She filed a complaint with the Toronto Police Service in March of 2021. Financial fraud. He'd convinced her to add him to her bank account 9 months in, said it was for shared expenses. When she left, the account had been drained. $32,000. Her RRSP had been cashed out. He told the investigating officer she'd done it herself and then forgotten. The case was dropped for insufficient evidence. I set down the photograph. I looked at it for a long moment. Find her, I said. Get me a number. He nodded, stood. One more thing. He didn't sit back down. He stayed standing, which meant it was something he needed distance from. The company your son-in-law works for, the one that's been paying his salary. Yes. He looked at me. I know, I said quietly. He nodded once. Does your daughter? No. And she's not going to find out from anyone but me. After he left, I sat alone in my office for a very long time. I thought about 5 years ago, when I'd created Mapleton Consulting Group through a numbered holding company and placed it under the umbrella of my main firm through 2 intermediary corporations. I thought about the day I'd called my lawyer and asked her to structure things carefully, quietly, in layers, because I wanted to see what my daughter's fiancé would do when he thought no one was watching. I thought about how I'd hoped, genuinely hoped, that I'd be wrong about him, that he'd be kind and honest and build something real. And I thought about my daughter, upstairs, who had worked for Mapleton for 4 years, believing she'd earned her position on her own merit, which she had, because I would never have kept her there if she hadn't, but who had never known that the company belonged to her mother. I owed her a conversation I had been dreading for years. She came downstairs at 9. My granddaughter was still sleeping. My daughter sat across from me at the kitchen table, wrapped in the housecoat she'd had since university, and looked at me the way she hadn't looked at me in a long time, like she was willing to be told the truth. I told her everything. She didn't speak for a very long time after I finished. She looked out the window at the gray February sky, at the snow in the garden, at a cardinal that had landed on the fence. When she finally looked back at me, her eyes were dry, which surprised me. He knew, she said. Didn't he? He married me because he thought it would eventually get him access to your company. I don't know when he figured it out, I said, but yes, I believe that's part of it. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. The other part was just, he's like this. With women. This is what he does. Yes, I said, I believe that too. She nodded slowly, like she was cataloging something, filing it away. The woman my daughter has always been, underneath the years of being made to feel small, was still there. I could see her. What do we do? She asked. I stood up, walked around the table, put my hand on her shoulder. We protect you, I said. We protect her. And we make sure he can't do this to anyone else. My lawyer, a woman named Catherine, who had been on retainer with my company for 12 years, arrived at the house at noon. She brought a legal pad, a voice recorder, and the particular calm of someone who has heard many terrible things and chosen, professionally and personally, to do something about them. My daughter told her everything. It took 2 hours. Catherine wrote without stopping. When my daughter finished, Catherine set down her pen and said, "What I'm hearing is a pattern of coercive control, financial fraud, and what the criminal code would classify as criminal harassment. We have the locked-out incident as the most recent event, the forged debt, and the isolation tactics you've described." She looked at my daughter. "Have there been specific threats? Things he said about what would happen if you left or told anyone?" My daughter was quiet. Then she said, "He told me that if I ever called my mother, he would take her away from me." Her away. Her granddaughter. Catherine made a note. That constitutes a custodial threat. Combined with the financial manipulation, we're looking at grounds for a peace bond, a custody application, and a parallel civil claim for the fraudulent debt. "What about the criminal fraud?" I asked. She nodded. "I'll be in touch with the Financial Crimes Unit at the Toronto Police. We'll need the forensic document examiner's full report and the corporate filings for the numbered company in Alberta." She paused. "We'll also need your daughter's testimony about any other instances where he made financial decisions without her knowledge or consent." "There were others," my daughter said quietly. She looked at her hands. "I signed things. He said they were for the mortgage, for insurance. I didn't always read them carefully. I trusted him." Catherine's voice stayed even. "That's not a character flaw. That's what coercive control does. It erodes your ability to trust your own judgment." She looked at her directly. "None of this is your fault." My daughter closed her eyes. That afternoon, my head of security had located Patricia. She was still in the city, living in the annex, working as a graphic designer. He'd spoken to her briefly by phone. She hadn't asked how we'd found her. She'd asked only one question. "Is she okay?" "She's safe," he'd said. "She wants to talk to you." Patricia arrived at my house at 4 o'clock. She was smaller than her photograph, quieter. She stood in my hallway and looked at my daughter, and the recognition that passed between them had nothing to do with faces or names. It was the recognition of two people who had survived the same storm from different boats. My daughter said, "I'm so sorry he did this to you." Patricia said, "I'm sorry you went through it too." They sat together on the sofa in my living room for 3 hours. I brought tea and stayed mostly quiet. Catherine sat in the corner with her notepad. What came out of that conversation was not just grief, though there was grief, but documentation, dates, patterns, specific phrases he had used with both of them, the same language about their families, not understanding the relationship, the same script about being the only one who truly cared, the same financial creep, starting small and accelerating once trust was established. He'd taken Patricia's RRSP. He'd forged my daughter's signature on a debt application. Different amounts. Sam architecture. By the time Patricia left, she had Catherine's card in her pocket and a meeting scheduled for the following morning. She paused at my front door and looked back. "I thought I was the only one," she said. "I thought I was too embarrassed to tell anyone." "You're not alone," my daughter said. Patricia nodded. Then she said something that stayed with me long after the door closed. She said, "I kept thinking, if only someone who knew him, someone who understood what he was doing, could have stopped him earlier, maybe it wouldn't have happened to you." I looked at her. "I understand that feeling," I said. "I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone after you." 3 days later, my head of security set a second folder on my desk. "I want you to be prepared," he said. I told him to start with the worst of it. The numbered Alberta company had been used to apply for a federal CEBA-adjacent business loan through a private lender, with collateral listed as an asset of Mapleton Consulting Group. Specifically, the federal consulting certification we'd held for 11 years, the one that allowed us to bid on government contracts, the backbone of 40% of my company's revenue. He had attempted, using forged documentation, to borrow $220,000 against a license he had no legal authority to touch. The lender had flagged the application 2 weeks earlier as potentially fraudulent. They had not yet filed a report. They were waiting. I picked up my phone and called them directly. By the end of that call, the application had been formally rejected. The file had been referred to the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit, and a fraud alert had been placed on every account associated with my son-in-law's numbered company. He didn't know any of this yet. He was still going to work each morning, still sending my daughter occasional messages, asking her to come home, still performing, as far as anyone on the outside could see, the role of a man who had made one regrettable decision in a difficult marriage. He had no idea what was coming. There is a fundraising gala every spring in this city, hosted by a women's business foundation I had been involved with for 15 years. That year it was being held at the Fairmont Royal York in March. Black tie, 400 guests, the kind of event where the city's professional community gathered to celebrate and be seen. My son-in-law had attended for the past 3 years as my daughter's guest, and this year, despite everything, he had the audacity to RSVP. He was listed on the program as a featured speaker in the business growth panel. I called the event director and told her not to change a thing. The morning of the gala, Catherine arrived at my house with a document package. 3 days earlier, a justice of the Ontario Superior Court had reviewed the evidence and granted 2 orders simultaneously: a restraining order prohibiting my son-in-law from contacting my daughter, and an emergency custody order granting her sole temporary custody of my granddaughter pending a full hearing. Officers had served him the papers at his office at 8 in the morning. By 8:15, his phone had begun to ring. He called my daughter at 8:47. Catherine was already at the kitchen table. My daughter answered on speaker. His voice was different than I'd heard it before. Not charming, not smooth, tight, like something about to snap. "You need to tell your mother to stop," he said. "Whatever she's doing, whatever she thinks she knows, she needs to stop." My daughter said nothing. "I know things about her company," he said. "I know about the accounts. If she pushes this, I'll make it very difficult for her. Do you understand me? I have documentation. I have emails. I can make her look very bad." My daughter's hands were flat on the table. She looked at me. I nodded. She said clearly into the phone, "I want you to know this call is being recorded." A pause. Then the line went dead. Catherine clicked off the recorder. Her expression didn't change. She said, "Extortion, attempted witness intimidation. That's Criminal Code Section 346 and Section 139. She made a note. He just handed us everything we needed for criminal charges. That evening, I wore my navy dress, the one I save for occasions that matter. My daughter wore the dark green wrap she'd bought the year before she got married, before she'd stopped buying things she liked. Patricia came in silver, her shoulders back in a way they hadn't been 3 weeks earlier. My granddaughter was at home with a sitter, drawing pictures at the kitchen table and watching her show. Before I left, she ran to the door and pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand, a crayon drawing of 3 women in fancy dresses. She'd labeled them in uncertain kindergarten letters: Grandma, Mama, Patricia. I kissed her forehead and told her we'd bring her back a chocolate from the dessert table. She said, "Grandma, are you going to fix it?" "Yes, sweetheart. That's exactly what we're doing." The Fairmont ballroom was exactly as I remembered it. Gilded ceiling, round tables in white linen, the low hum of 400 people performing their best versions of themselves, a string quartet in the corner, waitstaff moving through the crowd with champagne. My son-in-law was near the front of the room. He'd put on a good suit. He was smiling at someone, shaking a hand, laughing with his head tilted back. The performance of a confident man with a clear conscience. I had seen that performance before. I knew exactly how much was underneath it. I found my seat. My daughter and Patricia sat on either side of me. At 8:15, the program director introduced the evening speakers. At 8:30, the screen at the front of the room, which had been displaying a slide with the foundation's logo, went dark. My tech consultant, whom I had hired for the evening under the guise of audiovisual support, was in the control booth at the back of the room. I sent him a single text message. "Begin." The screen came back on. White text on black. "There is something this audience needs to know." The murmur in the room started immediately. Heads turned. Conversation stopped in uneven patches like a fire going out. The screen changed. A document. Blown up large enough to read from any seat in the room. A loan application. My daughter's name at the top. A signature in the space marked applicant. Beside it, in bold red text, the words, "Confirmed fraudulent. Forensic Document Examination Report, February 2026. A woman near the front said, "Oh my God." The screen changed again. bank transfer records, the Alberta numbered company, dates and amounts. My son-in-law had gone very still near the front of the room. He was staring at the screen. The color had left his face. The screen changed again. A SEBA-adjacent loan application, collateral listed as Mapleton Consulting Group Federal Certification, stamped across the top in red, referred to RCMP, February 2026. Someone said loudly, "Is this real?" No one answered. The room was watching. My son-in-law moved toward the back, toward the exit. Two men in security uniforms who had been positioned near the doors, men I had arranged to have placed there 3 days earlier, stepped into the aisle. Patricia stood. She walked to the front of the room slowly, and the crowd parted the way crowds do when someone moves with that particular kind of purpose. She climbed the 2 steps to the small raised platform beside the screen and faced the room. She said, "My name is Patricia. In 2019, I met the man standing at the back of this room. He told me he loved me. He moved into my apartment. He asked to be added to my bank account. He said it was about building something together." She paused. When I realized what was happening and tried to leave, my savings were gone. My RRSP was gone. He told the police I'd done it myself. The room was absolutely silent. She said, "I filed a report. Nothing happened. I told myself I was stupid for trusting him. I spent 2 years rebuilding everything I'd lost, and I told myself that was the end of it." She looked at my daughter. Then I got a phone call. My daughter stood. She walked to the front and stood beside Patricia. She didn't look at her husband. She looked at the room. She said, "I am his wife. I have a daughter with him. I worked for 4 years at a company I didn't know my mother owned, and during those 4 years the man I married opened fraudulent lines of credit in my name, attempted to leverage assets that didn't belong to him, and when I found out and needed help, he locked me out of our apartment in February with our 5-year-old. The sound in the room had shifted. I could feel it. I stood. I walked to the front. I took the microphone. "My name is Margaret Calloway," I said. "I have been building companies in this city for 31 years. I started with a consulting practice, a rented desk, and a client list of 12. Today I employ 63 people and hold federal contracting certifications that took a decade to earn." I looked at my son-in-law. The man who married my daughter believed he had married into access. He believed that charm and patience and a carefully constructed persona would eventually get him inside the doors of everything I'd built. He was methodical. He was practiced. He had done versions of this before. Patricia can tell you. The file I gave to the RCMP 2 weeks ago can tell you. I turned back to the room. What he never understood, what men like him never understand, is that women like us have been watching. Long before he thought we were paying attention, we were paying attention. Long before he thought there was anything to protect, we were protecting it. The doors at the back of the room opened. 4 officers in uniform entered with an RCMP investigator I had met twice before in connection with a fraud case that had affected one of my clients. He was a methodical man, good at his job, and he walked to the front of the room with the particular calm of someone who has done this many times. He looked at my son-in-law and said, "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of criminal fraud, forgery, uttering forged documents, and criminal harassment under the Criminal Code of Canada." He read the full caution. He had the right to retain counsel. He had the right to remain silent. My son-in-law said nothing. For the first time since I had known him, he had nothing to say. They walked him out through the ballroom doors. 400 people watched it happen. The room broke open after that. Voices and camera phones and reporters from 2 of the outlets that had been at the event pushing toward the front. The foundation director, a woman I'd known for 12 years, appeared at my elbow and took my hand without saying anything. That was enough. My daughter and Patricia stood together at the base of the platform. I walked down to them. We didn't say anything either. We didn't need to. The sentencing was on a Tuesday in late April. The courthouse on University Avenue. The gallery was full. The judge reviewed the evidence. She reviewed the forensic document reports, the corporate filings, the financial records, the testimony of my daughter and Patricia, the recorded phone call in which my son-in-law had attempted to intimidate a witness, and the RCMP investigator's report on the attempted fraudulent loan application against my company's assets. She looked at my son-in-law for a long moment before she spoke. The pattern of conduct described in this case represents a deliberate, sustained campaign of financial and psychological harm against multiple victims, she said. This court takes seriously the use of coercive control as a mechanism of abuse, and the amendments to the criminal code reflect the legislature's intention that such conduct be treated accordingly. She sentenced him to 4 years in a federal institution, restitution of $112,000 to Patricia, restitution of $87,000 to my daughter, and a civil judgment against the Alberta Numbered Company for the full fraudulent debt. He was prohibited from contacting either woman for 10 years following his release. When the officers led him out, he looked at my daughter. Not at me. At her. I watched her face. She didn't look away. She held his gaze until he was through the door, and then she exhaled, slowly, the way you breathe out, something you've been holding for a very long time. Catherine drove us home. My granddaughter was in the kitchen with the sitter, coloring at the table. When she saw her mother come through the door, she climbed down from the chair and ran across the floor in her socks, and my daughter caught her, lifted her up, held her. "Is it fixed?" my granddaughter asked into her mother's shoulder. My daughter said, "It's fixed, baby." 3 weeks later, my daughter came into the office for the first time knowing it was mine. Her office now. She walked through the door of Mapleton Consulting Group on a Monday morning and introduced herself to the staff as the new managing director. Most of them had been there long enough to know what had happened. They stood and applauded, the kind of applause that has weight behind it. She sat behind the desk, opened the files Catherine had prepared, and began to rebuild. I sat across from her and watched her work, and I saw in her the woman she had been becoming before 5 years of careful erosion. Sharp, steady, present. Patricia opened her studio again. She'd closed it when everything fell apart in 2021. Now she had a space in Kensington Market, light through tall windows, and work coming in. She called my daughter twice a week. They had become, without ceremony or announcement, something close to family. On the first warm Saturday of May, I drove to the park near the Loblaws, where I had found my daughter on that February bench. It was unrecognizable in the warmth, green and busy with strollers and dogs and people sitting on the grass. I sat on a different bench, farther from the entrance, and watched my granddaughter chase pigeons along the path. My daughter came and sat beside me. She said, "I keep thinking about what I would have done if you hadn't come." I said, "I was always going to come." She was quiet for a moment, but I should have called you myself, earlier, long before that bench. She looked at her hands. I kept thinking I could fix it, that if I just tried harder or was better, somehow it would change. "I know," I said. He made me believe that needing help was weakness, that asking for it meant I'd failed. I took her hand. "That's what they do," I said. "They don't announce themselves. They don't come in telling you they're going to take things from you. They come in telling you they're the only one who sees you clearly. They make themselves necessary before they make themselves dangerous. By the time you see the pattern, you're already inside it." She nodded slowly. "I should have trusted my own judgment earlier," she said. "Yes," I said. "And I should have told you the truth about the company earlier. We both held things too close. That's over now." My granddaughter ran back to us, breathless, one hand full of dandelions she'd pulled from the grass. She held them out to me with enormous seriousness, like she was presenting something valuable. I took them like they were. "Grandma, are we going to be okay?" she asked. I smoothed her hair back from her face. "We are well past okay," I told her. "We are magnificent." She laughed and ran back toward the path, arms out, coat flying behind her. My daughter leaned her head briefly against my shoulder. I didn't say anything. I just stayed. The sun was warm on my face, and my daughter was beside me, and my granddaughter was running in the green open air, and the city carried on around us, indifferent and lovely, the way cities always do. That is the thing about building something. You build it in full knowledge that storms will come for it. You build it anyway. You build it because the thing worth protecting is not the company, not the license, not the house in Forest Hill. It's that small girl with the dandelions, and the mother who almost forgot how strong she was, and the friend across the city who thought she was alone until she wasn't. You build it for them. And if someone comes to take it, you remind them who you are. If this story reaches you, and something in it sounds familiar, listen to that. That quiet voice that says something is wrong, that says you deserve better, that says love should not cost you yourself. That voice is telling the truth. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining it. The pattern has a name, and it can be stopped. If you are in this situation now, please reach out to a shelter, a legal aid clinic, or a trusted person in your life. In Canada, the Assaulted Women's Helpline is available at 1-866-863-0511. You do not have to wait until it gets worse. You do not have to wait at all. Like this video if it meant something to you. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And share it, because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear this today. This story contains dramatized elements. Some details have been changed, but the patterns of coercive control, financial abuse, and manipulation described here reflect real experiences faced by real people. If this kind of content is not for you, that's completely understandable. But if you stayed, I'm glad you did. Take care of each other, and above all, take care of yourself.